Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. It's the second in our CASEL Cares series, and I'm Emily Sumner, the host of today's webinar, and I am here to help you with any technical problems, answer any questions that you have, and guide our speakers through today's program. Before we get started, I'm excited to be joined by Karen Mimi and our presenter Jennifer Miller. They're up here on screen with me. But before we get to all the wonderful strategies for SEL at home that Jennifer is going to share with us, I'm going to go through just a few quick logistics and housekeeping items. First, I want to thank everybody for all of the questions that were sent in this week ahead of the presentation. Jennifer has read through them and she has tried to address as many of them as possible in the presentation that we're going to hear in just a few minutes. We're also going to hold a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. We're probably going to go for a full hour with Jennifer's presentation, but if you want to hang on for 10 or 15 minutes afterwards, we are going to take some of the questions that were sent in ahead of time and that come in throughout the webinar. So Suzanne, you've got on the correct slide. Thank you. So we know that you're going to have a lot of questions and things that you want to share with people, and we're going to make this as interactive as possible. And there's a couple different tools we're going to use. The first is the questions box that you see there on your screen. And you can ask a question of Jennifer. If you have technical problems, you can reach out to me through that same questions. That questions is a one-way communication. So you're only going to see what you type and then what I answer back to you. However, and Suzanne, you can go on to the chat screen. We are going to be posting as many comments as we possibly can into the chat box, which is something that all of you will be able to see. So if you look there at the screenshot, there's a little icon that's a talk bubble versus the talk bubble with the question mark in it. And if you click on that talk bubble there that's highlighted, you'll be able to see the comments that we're sharing and the reach outs from people. So we'll be using that tool to keep people in touch with each other throughout the webinar. We're also going to be having some questions. Jennifer's going to ask some specific structured questions of you. Suzanne, if you want to go to the next slide. And we're going to use a tool called Menti.com. So if you want to go ahead and open a web browser and go to Menti.com, the URL is there on your screen. And once you're there, if you enter code 30529, you can answer this test practice question that we've got to give Menti a try. And it looks like we've got people already chiming in, so that's great. Welcome from Asheville. That's my neck of the woods. Beautiful place. Chicago, Castle's hometown. Massachusetts. Great. So we can see how Menti's working, and it looks like it's working well. Oh, we've got someone from Chile. That's very exciting. So we'll be using this throughout the webinar, and we'll prompt you when to go to your web browser, Menti.com. And if you've already entered the code, then the next question will just be refreshed for you. If for whatever reason you get kicked out, you can always go back to Menti.com and enter that code 30529. All right, so now that we've had a little tour of the platform, I'd like to introduce Karen Mimi. As many of you know, Karen is President and CEO of CASEL, and we are really pleased that she could be here with us today to share a few words before we get started.
Great. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. This is the second in the series of CASEL Cares. CASEL Cares is a new initiative that we are launching that we expect to build together with you in the SEL community so that we can bring together experts with others to really bond together and support one another now, especially now more than ever. I wanted to introduce today our speaker, Jen Miller. For many of you, you may have seen Jen before. She's around a lot. Jennifer's been working with families and educators for 25 years on trying to help people be more effective in working with children through SEL. She's a great author and, by the way, a great illustrator of the book Confident Parents, Confident Kids. She has a great blog. If those of you are not following, you should check that out. It's pretty amazing. She's also a regular expert on NBC's Today Parenting and PBS Kids. Done a bunch of other really important things too around Washington Post and Huffington Post and Parent Magazine. But probably most importantly, she used to also work at CASEL. And we're excited to join forces to share an exciting webinar today in hopes of supporting all of you and all of us parents trying to grapple with these challenging times. So thank you everybody for joining. Please be patient as we figure out some of the glitches along the way, and do send in ideas and suggestions that you may have to influence future programming as this series continues. So thank you, Jen. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Karen, thanks so much for your introduction and your leadership at CASEL. It's a real honor to get to be a part of this CASEL Cares initiative, and it's been an honor to collaborate with CASEL for many years on research to practice projects and really try to impact children's social and emotional development and the adults who love those children. So it's a real honor for me. Thank you so much. Let's dive in and get started. We're going to talk today about my favorite topic, social and emotional learning at home, and how this unique moment in time, this time when we need to be at home with our families, could just be an ideal, perfect time to focus on social and emotional learning. I have lots of practical ideas for you today. So I hope that you have brought your notebook, your pencil, your pen, and you're ready to jot down ideas, because my hope for you today is that you will walk away with plenty to try out in your home today or in the coming days. So thank you for joining us. I should mention too, we have a huge audience today. I am so excited. So you're listing where you're from, saying hello in Menti. I hope that you also include what your role is of primary concern today. Maybe you're coming with the advantage of being an educator who's really curious about working with parents or sharing resources for parents, or your parenting is your primary concern today, or you're a nonprofit that supports both schools and families. So tell us your role and then where in the world you're joining from. I'm joining from Columbus, Ohio. Maybe you can see behind me, it's actually a beautiful sunshiny spring day. I'm seeing people from Connecticut, West Virginia, Norman, Oklahoma, Arizona, Fairfax, Virginia, Florida, Wisconsin, California, North Carolina, Vancouver, Canada. We've got after-school elementary childcare directors, school social workers, teachers, school psychologists, school counselors, multiple school counselors, school psychologists. Oh, I love the restorative practice manager from Hawaii. Let's see what else. Students, elementary administrator responsible for SEL, resource teacher, school psychologist, preschool teacher, behavior specialist, specialized physician, healthcare paraprofessional. Wow, what an exciting range of expertise we have here today. Behavior specialist, social worker, teacher, school counselor, school psychologist, after school manager, school psychologist, school specialist, many school counselors, I'm seeing a lot of social workers and paraprofessionals, kindergarten teachers, lots of teachers, educational specialists, and parents too. And I assume that many of you wear both hats, that you are both a parent and a professional. And so you're perhaps dealing with homeschooling while you're also educating or providing services for families. So perhaps you bring dual roles and dual hats to this wonderful conversation today. Keep entering into Menti, and we're going to go forward with our conversation. And we can skip this one. Emily, Karen gave me a beautiful introduction, and you know I've been doing this for 25 years. After 25 years, or should say about 10 years ago, I was traveling around working with principals and school leadership teams on integrating social and emotional learning into the academic curriculum. And I had a baby. My baby is now 12, but I had a baby. And when he was about 1, we had to go to a library story time. He was playing. I went to get him and I said, Ethan, pick your last thing. We're going to go. And he turned around, silent, but got red in the face, toddled up to me, and smacked me on the legs. And I'm sure I barely felt it. He was tiny, but I was shocked by my reaction. I was immediately felt punished. I wanted to run away and cry. Yet I studied child development. I know that toddlers hit, they bite, they lash out because they don't have the words to express themselves. So that was my first feeling, being punished. My second feeling or thought that rushed in was, oh, what if he's going to be a violent person someday? So I projected this catastrophic future for my son. Oh no, I'm raising a violent person. And then the third thought that rushed in was what we often do as parents. You're crazy. What? This is all nuts. You're completely irrational right now. And I walked away from that one experience and said, oh, this is why parenting is so hard. It's the mashup of emotions that we experience through our child's natural course of development that spurs old feelings that bring them right into the present, and we have to deal with them. And this is a moment of big feelings. So what better time to talk about social and emotional learning in the home? And that's really that one moment I go back to as the time when I started shifting my focus from schools to parenting and families and saying, we've got kids in our very home, and we are their first social emotional teachers. How can we do this in the messy, raw context of family life? So let's get into it. Could you, yeah, there we go. Okay, so we want to know, Mark Brackett did the first CASEL Cares webinar last week, and early on in the presentation, he asked, how are you feeling? And I think it's a great trend to continue. So how are you feeling? Please enter into Menti. Considering all that's going on, tell us how you're feeling today in your current context, in your home environment. How are you feeling? Feeling good, mixed emotions, tired of technology, overwhelmed with responsibility, thankful for health, family, friends, hopeful, starting to get more comfortable, but still uneasy. We kind of are, I've noticed that my family anyway is carrying this kind of low-level anxiety all the time, that it's kind of just under the surface, and we're much more easily triggered because of the environment. Calm, tired, overwhelmed. I've been hearing from parents literally every day who are feeling overwhelmed, unsure and a bit anxious. There's a lot of uncertainty right now. Some are okay, some are hopeful, some are stressed, some are grateful and anxious. I would say that I feel that way too. I feel anxious, but I also feel really hopeful. And I'm very excited and honored to be participating with you in this conversation today. Empowered, relaxed, stuck and stressed, overwhelmed, unsettled. I'm really hoping that maybe this will calm some of our nerves because I have a lot of ideas for you that you can use right away. So hopefully this will calm some of our anxiousness. It sure helps me when I have information and things that I can take action on right away. Okay, well, let's move on. We've got a lot of great content for you. When I started to stay at home with my family 3 weeks ago, we started doing social and emotional type morning meetings on Facebook Live through my Confident Parents, Confident Kids feed. And every morning we say the Pledge of Allegiance. So I thought this would be a really nice way to begin. So go ahead in your homes. I know I can't hear you. You can hear you, but join with me. We pledge allegiance to the families of our world, that we recognize we are closer and more connected than we may seem. And through the love for which we stand, one world, many beliefs, indivisible, with liberty, health, safety, and justice for all. Thank you if you joined in, and that kind of sets an intention for our work together over the coming hour. So let's talk about the purpose. Really, the purpose is very simply, I want you to have a really strong set of ideas today as you leave of ways that you can boost your child's social and emotional learning at home. And there are many professionals joining us, so you should also leave, if you're a professional that supports educators or you are an educator yourself, what are ways that you can support the families that you work with to do this thing called social and emotional learning in family life? And that includes boosting our own and honing our own skills as parents. So let's go for it. Go ahead, Emily. Great. Okay. So first, I need to say that every family culture is different. And every parent is their own best problem solver. So when we're working with families, we have to have lots of room and space for dialogue, for saying, that strategy doesn't exactly align with my values. But there are things we know to be true from research. So then how can we take those things that we know from research are true, like it's essential to build social and emotional competencies in our children, and how can we translate that into everyday routines and practices that we do with our family? But there is no right way to be in this space, in this time, or as parents ever. There is no such thing as perfect parenting. We are all learning, and so we all need to give each other grace. As parents, as educators, we need to give one another grace that we are in the process of learning. Go ahead, Emily. Okay, so we are in a new era right now, and the folks who do substantive change work research on changing habits find that when you are emerging into a new era, it is an ideal time to look at all your habits. And so might this just be the perfect moment to say, how can we become more intentional about social and emotional learning in family life? What if we could look at parenting through fresh eyes, through the lens of our children's social and emotional development, and examine our own roles in that? So let's get into that here. I'd like to ask you to think about the big picture. When we are stressed, when we're anxious, as many of you said you were feeling, research has shown that flying up high, taking the eagle eye view, looking at the big picture really helps lessen our stress. So let's take a moment to look at the big picture. What lessons could your children, what lessons could the families with whom you work be learning from this unique time? When we're at home with our families all the time, when we are secluded and really not having much eyeball to eyeball contact with other people. So we have this kind of containment in our homes. We're using a lot of technology. We're limited to what we can do. How does this unique time with COVID-19 actually an opportunity to teach big picture lessons to our children?
So some lessons people are learning is to just be thankful for the small things, thankful for the sunshine, lessons in gratitude, that family is everything. That's a great one. Slowing down, that we're responsible for other people. Clarity and communication is key. That's a good one.
Yeah. Oh, and we're going to talk a lot about that.
Yeah. So thanks everybody for sharing. If you want to keep sharing, we'll put as many as we can into the chat, but we'll move on with the presentation.
Great. All right. I actually did a little bit of research on homeschooling statistics, and I felt that they were really comforting. So if we're really concerned about our children missing out on academic learning time, I think some of these statistics will maybe help you feel a little better. So we could go to the next slide, please. An estimated 3.4 million adults have been homeschooled at least once during their K-12 years. I was amazed by that. 3.4 million adults have been homeschooled at some point in their K-12 years. In 2016, 2.3 million children were homeschooled. There is an economically, racially, and culturally diverse blend of children who are homeschooled, including 32% Black, Latinx, and non-white. Typically, children who are homeschooled are 15 to 30 percentile points higher than public school students on standardized achievement tests. Homeschooled students typically average above average on social and emotional measures, which was a surprise to me, including peer interaction, self-concept, and leadership skills. And whether parents were certified teachers or not did not relate to academic outcomes. So I think these school at home statistics are really wonderful and give us some comfort that parents can do this. We've got this, parents. And if you're working with families, your confidence in their ability to help their child through this process is really important in giving them the confidence to stick with it and be a support. We don't expect parents to be content experts. How can we show parents that really being there to answer questions, to be curious, to encourage, to show confidence in their child is really critical in helping them get through this learning process and learning together as a family. So let's talk about social and emotional learning. Let's go to the social emotional learning framework. This will be very familiar to you if you are a champion of social and emotional learning. This is the CASEL framework that is used in schools so often globally. And there are 5 social and emotional skills, including self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision making. We know that schools that emphasizing these skills, becoming intentional about these skills in schools is critical to children's success. We also know that parents are children's first social and emotional teachers. Now they are their primary social and emotional teachers as we go through school routines at home. So it is really worthwhile asking, how can, instead of it being the hidden curriculum, we call it the hidden curriculum at schools when schools do not have a research-based social and emotional curriculum, how can we become intentional about social and emotional learning at home to not only enhance their school learning, but enhance their entire life and prepare them for the future? Father of social and emotional learning, as he's called, Roger Weisberg, and I, and child developmental psychologist from the University of Pittsburgh, Shannon Wanless, we surveyed 100 social and emotional learning experts, and we wanted to know about their personal parenting practices. So we asked them a number of questions, and we got a number of interesting results, and you'll get the research brief link if you want to check out all of our findings. But the finding that I want to share with you that was so interesting was about language. And this, for all you professionals who are joining, this is so critical. We don't, in parenting life, we speak the language of the heart. We don't speak the language of researchers. So we asked all these social emotional learning experts, what are your hopes for your children? And what are your hopes for your own parenting? And we let them give us their own words, and they said things that you would expect, like, we want our children to be happy, we want them to be loving, we want them to be kind and responsible and confident. And similarly for their parenting, they said, we want to be patient, we want to have high expectations, we want to be encouraging. And we took those hopes that parents said they had, and we aligned them with the scientific definitions of the social and emotional competencies. We figured there'd be a few outliers. In fact, there was a direct alignment between those hopes and social and emotional competencies. So it's really important that when we're communicating with parents, we use the language of families, of what parents, how parents talk about their hopes and dreams for their children, but we also are aware of that alignment, that every single day we have an opportunity through our everyday routines, through our parenting challenges, through the household responsibilities, to help cultivate children's social and emotional skills. And we also have an opportunity to hone them in ourselves. So let's move forward here. What do you think, again, considering this unique time, when you expressed your feelings, many of you said, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm feeling strained, I'm feeling anxious, I'm worried. What are our psychological needs for ourselves and our children, for our families at this point? And this is a mentee opportunity, so please enter in. We'd love to see your responses. What do you believe as families our psychological needs are? Calming strategies, coping with the changes of a pandemic, connection to friends, nurturing touches. We're dealing with trauma and attachment issues, reassuring children that new norms are okay, spending time with family, focusing on relationships and family, less screen time, and we're needing to use screen time for social connection. So how do we manage that? Finding support systems, again, coping strategies, dealing with mental health, anxiety, regulating emotions, communicating with our children about the pandemic, severe emotional needs, maintaining structure at home, how to feel safe, how to continue to feel grounded with this anxiety level. Anxieties, gender questioning, loneliness, disappointment, ADHD, dyslexia, how to deal with depression in this climate. Missing hugging friends and family, having guests for dinner, so that social interaction is really top of mind. Worrisome news. The news is so prevalent in our lives right now. Struggling not to be able to be with friends, children missing their friends. Boy, do we understand that. Lots of anxiety. So thank you. Keep putting in your comments, and we're going to move on. But we really appreciate your contribution. We're going to focus very much on what you said were your psychological needs for yourself, for your families, for your children. We're going to talk not only about physical safety, but also how do you create psychological safety, which was very much a theme in your comments. And then also when we're thinking about learning time with our children, and we're trying to help them focus on learning in the midst of anxiety and not feeling safe. How do we inspire hard work? So we're going to talk a bit about how to inspire children through focusing on giving them a sense of autonomy or power, giving them a sense of belonging, and giving them a sense of competence in family life, all really critical to inspire their hard work. So let's talk about all of those. I wanted to just share with you briefly the four kind of main ways in which we influence social and emotional skills in family life as we become more intentional about it. And honestly, our children learn social and emotional skills through modeling, whether we like it or not, right? So they may repeat a sentence in public that we've said in private, and we might get infuriated by it, but the truth is they're learning through modeling. So how can we become more intentional about our modeling? Coaching, when I'm talking about coaching, I'm talking about emotional coaching, and we'll get into specifics on what that looks like. Practice, how can we create social and emotional practice opportunities? Again, I'll have lots of strategies in that area. And then how can we create a supportive environment? So let's dive into some specific ideas. And again, as we dive into specific ideas, think about the families that you work with and how you might adapt these strategies for those families and their particular conditions. I have resources in Spanish. I have, you might consider families who don't have internet access. There are such a wide range of families that maybe they're food insecure right now. Maybe mom lost her job or dad lost his job. So how are we, if we're working with families, how are we thinking about the various stressors that they have and framing these strategies in that light, that they are their own best problem solvers? We're going to focus on two, because I don't want to overcomplicate. So we're going to talk about routines. Routines really create, if we're consistent with routines, if we co-create routines with our family members, including our children, then we really create a sense of safety. And that is psychological safety as well as physical safety. Our children know what to expect. This works for preschoolers as well as it works for 7th graders, as well as it works for 15-year-olds. So let's talk about routines. And then we're also going to talk about learning time and how our learning time can include becoming intentional about emotional skills and social skills. So let's do it. I want to talk briefly about your morning routine. The morning routine can really offer a sense of safety to children as they start their learning day if you're consistent with it. I encourage parents to talk about it when you're not in the morning routine. The morning routine can be a pressure cooker even at home, because everybody's got business to attend to. We're all trying to get those tasks done, brushing teeth, getting dressed, getting breakfast, so that we can move on to the work of the day. So how can you be consistent about your morning routine? By talking about it at a time, maybe Sunday afternoon, when you're not in the morning routine. How can you have your child write or draw your plan and keep it super simple? We wake up at whatever time, we get dressed, and be sure that when you're talking about your plan, you're not only focusing on the business of the morning, but you're also looking for ritual opportunities for connection. So we have a hallway hug before getting dressed in the morning, every morning for forever, because my son's always struggled to get dressed. He doesn't want to get out of his pajamas. Who does? So we have a ritual hug, we have a quick connection, it doesn't take long, and then he's on his way. What can you do to create caring connections in the morning? It can be very brief, but to be consistent, to get business accomplished, and then to move on with your day. And make sure, if you have preschoolers, have you practiced getting on shoes together so that the skills are ready to go. Everybody's taking responsibility for their roles. Your plan is posted in a place where everybody can refer to it. And if you get caught up or challenged, you can say to your child, what's next on our routine? What do we talk about? Where do we go now? And they can take some responsibility and let you know. I'm also, as I mentioned, doing morning meetings on Facebook Live on Confident Parents, Confident Kids. So come join us. We do the Global Pledge of Allegiance every morning. We do some deep breathing and get ready for our day. So let's go on to the next. As you're encouraging new behaviors, whether this is the morning routine or any routine in your day, as you're practicing, you're talking about being consistent with positive behaviors, we have to notice when our children are really trying. So I notice you're brushing your teeth without my asking. That's how we promote positive behaviors. Instead of the gotcha, and we get into this habit of no, 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 when we see things are going wrong, how can we notice when things are going right? And then let's talk about your morning routine. So it's really important to help our child through the morning routine with consistency for their mental and psychological safety. But what about your morning routine? I use my morning coffee. I don't have my coffee mug. I have my water glass, but I use my morning coffee every morning, the smell of it, to remind me that I need to take deep breaths. We start out, research confirms, but we know, like we feel it, that we start out with the most amount of self-control in the morning, and it whittles away throughout the day. So if our hope is to be patient, how can we create a well of patience that we can draw from throughout the day? So I would encourage you to think about, how are you getting deep breathing into your morning routine? How are you finding some calm, quiet moments to create that well of patience to help you get through the many responsibilities of our day? Okay, let's talk about feelings. So, oh, I'm sorry, let's talk about learning time. We'll talk about feelings in a minute. So, with our learning time, it is really important that we design a schedule that works for our families. And maybe, I mean, in our family, to simplify, we took our school schedule and we have augmented it and adapted it a bit, but we basically do the school schedule every day. Now, for other families, they will need to work on something that's comfortable for them. But how do you make sure that you have some sort of daily schedule so that you know that everybody's finished at the morning routine at X time, that learning starts, and that some adult is there to help respond to questions? They're on point, even if your child is fairly independent, communicating virtually. How can you be a point person in the family that's going to help with the many questions that come up? And when you design your schedule, post it. Keep it up. All family members need to be aware of that learning schedule so that you can all refer to it. So let's talk about the mental health basics when we're planning our schedule. Now, this schedule that you see on your screen here was designed by a 10-year-old. I promise you, it was designed by a 10-year-old. My friend sent this to me and she said, you know, I coached him a little bit. I said, make sure that we have time to move, time to eat, time to breathe, those kinds of things. And he sat down knowing what his school requirements were and designed this gorgeous schedule. So how are you incorporating the mental health basics into your daily family schedule so that you're getting healthy foods, you're hydrating, you're getting movement, you're going outside? And I would just bring up the research on love and connection. We are challenged with our social interactions and our social connections right now, which means that the family members that we are permitted to be with, to be close to, are absolutely essential to feed our human needs of connection. Our children need our love and our touch more now than ever. They always need it, but more now than ever. You're probably familiar, because it's popular, the research on hugging is that it is an immunity booster. Yes, it prevents illness, including the common cold, but what if hugs prevented the coronavirus? So remember that loving touch is really important within families to help us feel mentally healthy and safe. Another study that I want to mention that is so amazing, they hooked people up to fMRI brain scans, and they blasted a white noise. And some people were alone and they knew the white noise was coming. But when they blasted the white noise, their brain lit up with this terrible danger threat response, which you would expect. But the people whose partner were stroking their arm, the partner was right next to them, and they were touching them, comforting them, those people did not experience that threat danger response. How powerful is that? So when we're talking with families, mental health basics mean that we are really connecting as family members, because that's the unit where we are permitted to have those loving touches and connections. It's really more essential than ever. So getting set up for learning success, on your resource sheet that you'll leave with an article which really outlines for families how to set up their space, both their physical space and their psychological space for learning. So we'll just touch on this briefly, but know that you'll have resources on this really critical issue. But how can you create a sacred space in your home that's clean, well organized, that is a consistent go-to for your child? And if you have multiples, then you need multiple spaces designated per child for them to do their work. What school tools do they need? How can they be arranged and at the ready so that it's not chaotic when they sit down to do their work? Allow children choices. Their feeling perhaps out of control as we are as adults. Their life has been turned upside down, quite literally. Their learning has been turned upside down. We forget as adults that offering choices doesn't have to be huge, big, monumental. It can be, do you want to use a crayon or a pen? Do you want to sit here or do you want to sit there? Do you want to wear the red shirt or the orange shirt? It doesn't have to be big, but our children need a sense of power. That is a human need. And so how are we offering them that sense of power through small choices throughout the day? I also encourage parents to use a timer or some kind of timing system that is not parents controlling the time. It helps our children be more responsible for their schedule and their agenda. It gives them a sense of control, and then it's not the parent nagging, nagging, nagging. And also, we said parents are not don't ever need to be content experts, but also we don't need to fix our children's mistakes. Mistakes are an essential part of learning. So how can we step back and allow for mistakes so that the learning can take place? It can be tricky. We have to use our own self-management skills, right? Absolutely. Okay. Let's move on to our attitude absolutely matters in whether our children will work hard or not. Here's a fascinating study. They looked at mothers. They looked at two groups of mothers. One set of mothers said, oh, that looks wrong. We really need to check your work. I'm not so sure about that. And they were really questioning their child's performance. They were picking at mistakes. There was that set of mothers. And then there was another set of mothers that said, hey, you got this. I'm here for questions. I'm here to support you, but I know that you got this. These two groups predicted academic outcomes, so that this group, the children felt insecure. They were not confident in their work because mom says, I'm making lots of mistakes. In this group, mom said, I got it. And it predicted successful academic outcomes for the long run. Attitude matters. You will come away with this. I created this as a poster, but you can print it out as a handout. It's free. You can share it with your families for a self-evaluation for children. How hard am I working? How would I rate how hard I'm working with my parents? A wonderful, quick tool for self-evaluation. So let's talk about feelings. So how can we become intentional about the emotional curriculum at home? Even if our school isn't taking a focus on emotions, this is a moment of big feelings. This is a moment where we may be able to look back and say, we had an intensive time of promoting resilience in our family, in promoting resilience and strength in our children. But we have to become intentional about feelings if we're going to do that. So feelings simply are paying attention to our children's interpretation of what's happening inside or outside of themselves based on their past experiences. And it's a quick interpretation. It's subject for reinterpretation. There's always meaning we can make out of feelings, but we have to name them and pay attention to them in order to respect our children's hearts and minds and spirits. So let's talk about specifically challenging emotions. When I say challenging emotions, these might also be called threat or warning emotions. This is anger, this is fear, this is, as you said, feeling overwhelmed. My child came back from the grocery store. We're trying to only go every couple weeks, but he came back this past weekend and said there was tension in the air. He could feel it, and I could see his stress. when he returned from the grocery store? How are we talking about challenging feelings as a routine, as a daily practice? How will you remember to name and notice feelings? I love this poster from Jim Borgman. On your resource list, there's a big feelings list. Parents can print it out, put it on their refrigerator as a reminder. How we're not used to talking about feelings. It's not a regular part of our language. So how can we become more intentional about talking about naming our feelings and reflecting on those feelings? What generated, what triggered those feelings? What are we thinking about it? And that gives us the opportunity to say, if those are normal feelings, then where are they coming from, and how can we deal with them? How can we create coping strategies that are healthy? We sat down at dinner the other night, and fear came up, and we were talking about horror movies, and my husband and I both wanted to quickly shut it down because we thought, oh, he's scared already and he's going to have nightmares. And that was our tendency. And then we took a pause and said, oh, this is exactly what we should be talking about. If you bury it, it becomes more of a problem. So how can we create trust and intimacy by naming those to tame them? Okay, let's move forward. One way, as you're naming emotions, particularly in the moment when you see your child get that furrowed brow, how can you name the physical symptoms that accompany it? So, maybe you're seeing the furrowed brow, so you name, are you feeling worried? I see the creases in between your eyebrows, or your face is getting red. Are you angry? Are you frustrated right now? Are your palms sweaty? Is your tummy feeling okay? Naming those symptoms helps us begin to build our self-awareness and recognize them. And by the way, as adults, we're not great at this. It takes us some reflection to name our emotions and to name the body symptoms that accompany some of our bigger feelings. So how can we practice this with our children and hone our own self-awareness as well as theirs? Let's talk about then what. So we've named our emotions, and our children or ourselves, when we name an emotion like, I'm feeling overwhelmed, all of a sudden I feel very vulnerable. I've admitted something that feels like a weakness. And so I'm put in this position of feeling vulnerable. So how can we take care with that vulnerability? How can we help normalize it for our children? Say, it is normal. I know so many people who are feeling overwhelmed right now. I've had so many moments of feeling overwhelmed. What's going on? What's your thinking? What's the story in your head that is playing over and over, that's making you feel overwhelmed? And we know from research and from the wonderful organization 6 Seconds that emotions, the fuel of an emotion lasts 6 seconds. That's it. Which means that, but we feel it, of course, much, much longer, which means that we are refueling with our story. So how can we ask our children about their stories and find out what are they thinking about? What are they ruminating about? And if they are ruminating, in other words, running that hamster wheel of worry over and over again, how can we name it, call it out, and then talk about ways to stop the ruminating, reframe it, gain a new perspective? So let's talk a bit about that. Let's talk about coping strategies, which many of you mentioned. This unique time, this unique moment is an awesome moment for talking about and teaching coping strategies. Of course, we know deep breathing has a physiological function that if we are stuck in the caveman part of our brain, the amygdala, we're stuck in fight, flight, or freeze. We've been emotionally hijacked. A chemical has washed over our brain and has removed the ability to think logically, to use our creativity and our reasoning and our language. Then deep breathing actually makes that chemical recede. It actually restores our thinking. So how can we proactively practice deep breathing? There's hot chocolate breathing where we smell in the aroma and then blow on the hot cocoa. There's teddy bear breathing where we make a teddy bear ride up and down. Bedtime is a wonderful time to practice deep breathing strategies with our children. Why not take this moment to proactively practice deep breathing so that they have that coping strategy at the ready? And if you're feeling yourself getting heated, use it and use the twofer of modeling that deep breathing. Also creating a safe base in your house. How can you create a space in your house for your child for them to go when they're feeling overwhelmed, when they're really upset? Maybe you ask them, what makes you feel a sense of comfort and safety? Maybe it's a pillow, maybe it's a teddy bear. Maybe you include drawing materials or writing materials there. What's really important about this, if you're teaching and trying to internalize self-management skills, is that you never use it yourself. In other words, if you say, go to your safe base, it takes away the power from the child to self-select and say, I'm going to take care of myself. So then how can you practice? You set up the space and you practice. Oh, I'm really mad. I think I'll feel better if I go to my safe space and we go there together and we hug our teddy bear, or we draw or write. If it's a teenager, maybe they need to write, or they illustrate and they start to feel better. And you can practice your deep breathing in those places. Now, when your child is heated, you see the red face, you see they're upset, you can gently remind, would your safe base make you feel better? Would it be a comfort to you? And here's the trick. If they say no, okay, that's okay. We're giving them the power. It's their choice and it's their self-management skill to build. But we've done the teaching job of helping them set up the space, practice the space, and then it's their option to use the space. And then how can we create a list of coping strategies? There are so many that we can use with our children, or our children can use when they're upset, and they don't need to be complex. They can be extremely simple. How can we walk outside and breathe fresh air? Get a drink of water. So I encourage families to make lists and make it specific to your own family and what makes your child feel better. How can you brainstorm a list of coping strategies together? So I think we're gonna ask this question to you. When you think about coping strategies, which ones have you successfully used for yourself or with your child or with your students? Mindfulness activities, yoga, and there are wonderful online resources. I love Wushanti for children, children's yoga. Coping strategies, schedules, and routines create that mental, psychological safety. Get outside, boy, every day. We do walks, I want to say 3-4 times a day. Lots of time outdoors. Naps can be restorative. Art, music. Music changes the environment. When you put on, I will put on instrumental jazz music, or there's spa station on Spotify, and you calmly put that on in the house. It changes the whole environment. How can you include music? Exercise, tapping, wonderful. Deep breath, space, listening, physical activity. Again, routine, self-care activities. And sometimes I notice that if I'm doing for my child, I am doing for myself. So I'm not so great at self-care when I'm really busy, but I will try to do it for my child so that I get the benefit with my child, knowing that that self-care for both of us is absolutely critical. Lots of, oh, use the mood meter. Mark Brackett's wonderful mood meter. Absolutely. Great. Thank you for all those coping strategies. Keep the brainstorming list coming. Thank you. Um, Another thing to think about as we're reframing our children's stories during this time, one thing is to think about your daily dose of news intake. We are getting a whole lot of news, and obviously it's important to be informed. But there are studies on young children who will witness a news story on TV, and as news tends to do, they repeat over and over, and young children can be re-traumatized over and over by rewatching uh, scary or violent news. So how can we become informed but also limit our news intake so that it's not defining our lives? It's not in the background 24/7, because believe it or not, it is contributing to our sense of anxiety and overwhelm. And then how can we tell our grandmother's stories? Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, and was in a concentration camp himself and helped so many survive the oppressive conditions of a concentration camp, talked about ancestors. How could you make your ancestors proud? How can you envision your ancestors watching you at this moment, thinking about the trials they went through? Like, did they live through the Depression? Did they live through World War II? What did they live through? And how can we make them proud through our daily decisions, through the role that we're playing with our children? It really, the ancestor effect produces gratitude. And I'm in the resources, I'm going to leave you with a wonderful New York Times article about two women who talk about living through the Spanish flu, the Depression, and the Holocaust, and what their perspective is on COVID-19. So how can we reframe? And finally, let's be sure that we are taking brain breaks. It's where there's been a lot of talk about grit and persistence and perseverance, and it is really important to encourage our children to work through goals. But we know how the brain works. We know that the minute we step into the shower, we get a million ideas, even if we were stumped in front of the computer screen. How can we use the same concept with our children to help refresh their brains? It doesn't have to take long. And in fact, you can just set a timer for a kitchen timer for 2 minutes. We're going to walk away. We're going to get a drink of water. We're going to walk outside, get some fresh air, take a few deep breaths, and then we're going to come back to our work. Your children or the families that you work with are likely to have frustration and upset during their schoolwork. It's going to happen. It's a totally different way of learning than they're used to. So be sure you're building brain breaks in as a key coping strategy. Okay, let's talk about social connection. Again, which is a hot topic, and we're in such a unique time for social connection right now. How are you socially connecting? What feels satisfying to you? For those who have children in their households, have you asked your children what kind of social connections feel satisfying. We've done a lot of them. We had a virtual dinner with a family in Seattle, dear friends. We've been doing lots of Zoom meetings with family. We did a bear hunt in our neighborhood where messages were sent to put teddy bears in your windows, and we biked the neighborhood, and that was a whole lot of fun. I asked my child, what of all the things that we've done to try to socially connect, what are the things that really have stuck out in your mind as meaningful to you? And the ones he pointed to were texting his friends, and like conversation texting, and seeing friends at 6 feet distance in the park where they could have a conversation. So what I took from him is that we really need meaningful connections. It's not enough to see people on Zoom, to have a quick hi or a flyby, small talk, but how can we help our children meaningfully connect? And maybe it's just with one best friend. It doesn't take a ton, it doesn't have to be a ton of social connections, but maybe if our child has one closer friend, how can we facilitate a deeper connection with them? Maybe a longer Zoom playtime where they share ideas or Lego structures or whatever. But how can we facilitate that with our families? Also, we are on screens all the time now to connect. So how can we brainstorm with our family? And I think this is important to do with children, but also for ourselves. What are our favorite off-screen activities? And have a list. Let's do a brainstorm and have a list at the ready. I love big newsprint so we can post it up. But my child, all children are highly stimulated by the screens, and when they come off, it is harder. Their hormones have been stimulated from that screen time. So when they come off the screens, it is very hard for them to figure out what to do. And parents are going to get frustrated by our children saying, I'm bored, I don't know what to do. So how can you create favorite activity off screen lists so that there's a go-to? You say, oh, check out your list. Let's see what we can pull out today, what puzzle or game or new Lego challenge we're going to work on. Okay, let's see. Okay, we're gonna get into, let's talk about social learning. How can you make Zoom interactions more meaningful? And if you're a school counselor, a school psychologist, you're a teacher, perhaps you're meeting with families through Zoom online. What I have noticed as I've done those Zoom interactions is that people are so eager to get to academic content that they miss out on personal sharing. It takes more time digitally to personally share. Yet, that social connection is vital. So why not take the time to do a go round? Maybe you're meeting with a class of 20. Could you ask a question and do a poll like we've done throughout this presentation, where everyone gives their feedback? Can you do a sharing like in morning meetings where you ask something like, how are you feeling? Or how is your family connecting right now? Or what's your favorite thing about dinner time? How can you ask personal questions that actually help families, children connect with one another? And we can use social and emotional learning strategies that were from in school and adapt them to Zoom. Also, this is the perfect time to learn about netiquette. So how do our children appropriately communicate? How do they learn about the fact that everything that they communicate online is public information, that their teacher can see it, that anyone can see it? Common Sense Media is such an awesome resource for learning about how we can be online. And then I'm going to get into some very specific tools for you to share with families or to use in your own family on family communication. So let's deep dive into that. This is the Fighting Fairly Family Pledge. How can you talk about how to argue fairly in family life, what to do and what you're going to agree not to do? This is a really quick one-pager, and families can sign it and agree. We're going to do these things when we argue. We're going to not do these things when we argue. Okay, go forward. Sibling conflict, how can you use, for example, a peace rose in your family so that you have a physical symbol of working it out? So parents are not refereeing, but there is a rose that you have used in your family life to practice. Every time we have siblings have a conflict, somebody's going to grab that rose, present it to the other one, and say, let's work on this together and focus on the problem together. Again, you're going to get a resource on that. Go ahead. And then how can we plan for emergencies? I'm guessing that you have planned for going grocery shopping. How can you plan for emotional fires, which we will all have when we're feeling overwhelmed? So that if the emotional hijacking has happened, if our plan is to be amazing and emotionally intelligent in that moment, we're not going to be. But if we have a plan ahead of time and we've shared it with our family, we will be. So go ahead, go forward. You are going to leave with a family emotional safety plan. It again is a one-page set of prompts so that you ask the question, what will I say? First of all, how will I notice when I am really triggered, when I'm back in my survival mode? What will I say? I say, Mommy needs 5 minutes. Where will I go? Do I need to stay in the room with young children and just plop down and close my eyes and go inside? What will I do? Will I deep breathe? Will I reflect? Will I reframe? And then how will you prepare your family in advance? If you only use one tool from this presentation, this is it. This is so important. How can we plan ahead for our big feelings and prepare our family with our plan so that we're ready and we can respond with emotional intelligence? Go ahead. And then how can we talk as a family about household responsibilities so that we are all upping our game and really contributing together? And you'll get an age by stage chart and cleanup songs. You'll have so many resources that your family will all be able to contribute to household responsibilities together. I would also say that power struggles are going to arise. Everyone's feeling a lack of power at the moment. So the key to responding to a child who's trying to bait you is the pause. We can engage our self-control when we pause. So how can you look at pausing, taking some deep breaths? That will engage our self-control, our impulse control, and then we can think of a better response than if we respond quickly. Go ahead and forward. Your challenge today and for the parents that you work with is, how can I see parenting through a social and emotional learning lens? When I come up on any parenting challenge, how can I use, what social and emotional skills can I use myself? What can I build and hone in myself? And then what opportunity is this challenge to promote social and emotional skills in my child? Go ahead. For our babies, physical, social, emotional, cognitive development, the number one ingredient is love. And advance, if you would, forward. It's true for our older children as well. They need a safe space where their hearts and minds and spirits are accepted. and acknowledged and named and normalized. And so how can we focus on that in family life and show them daily love? We all really need it right now. Go ahead. There are lots of free tools and resources on Confident Parents, Confident Kids, including cooperative games by Social Emotional Skill, book recommendations by Social Emotional Skill, global online exploration. There are so many resources that are free. So check out the resource list and check out the Confident Parents, Confident Kids site. Our children raise us as much as we raise them. If we look for the opportunity to be raised by our children. So how can we ask the essential question when we're challenged? What are we learning from our children? How can we advance our social and emotional skills from each and every challenge? Go ahead. So what are you taking away? I'd love to hear from you. I shared so much content in this presentation. I'd love to hear, is there one thing that you're going to take away as you go back to your family life or working with families? What are you going to take away from this?
And folks, feel free to share in the chat. Because of our time constraints, we are going to move ahead and wrap this up.
This is the perfect time to learn about children's social and emotional development by age and stage. So I hope you will check out my book, which does exactly that. It's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all of the sites that sell books. But for your parents that you serve as well, I hope you will check out this wonderful resource that was just out this year.
All right, well, thank you so much, Jennifer. And I'm sorry we had to rush through the end of this presentation because you did have so much to share. Yes, so we are going to send everyone the resource list that Jennifer referred to many times. So you'll get that by email tomorrow. And then also CASEL has compiled and curated a list of resources for parents and caregivers, as well as educators. And that's on the CASEL site at the URL on your screen. We'll also include that in the follow-up email. So keep an eye on your inbox tomorrow for that information. I also want to invite you to next Friday's webinar, Building Resilience to Support Ourselves, Others, and Our Students. This is going to be another great program that is free to all of you and anyone else that you'd like to invite. So we'll include a link to register for that in the email that you'll receive tomorrow. So I do want to thank everyone for taking the time today and for your patience with our technology problems. And thanks for all of the questions and comments and ideas that you shared with us. I know it was really helpful for everyone to see those and to feel like they're part of a bigger community right now as we're all sitting inside in our houses with just our families. So thank you, Jennifer, for being with us today. And thank you, CASEL, for bringing you here.
Thank you. What a treat. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.